I remember the exact moment I stopped feeling anything, not sadness, not anger, not even emptiness in the dramatic way people romanticize it. The kind you write poetry about, the kind that makes you interesting at dinner parties. No, this was something quieter, something more dangerous. I was sitting in a room that took me 11 years to earn the right to sit in, floor-to-ceiling glass, a city below me breathing and blinking like something alive. And I was looking at it, all of it, and I felt absolutely nothing, like watching a movie with the sound off, like being a ghost in your own life, like showing up to the party you planned and realizing somewhere between the planning and the arriving you forgot to bring yourself. That was the moment. That was the crack in everything. I had built something. God, I had built something. I want you to understand that. I'm not here to pretend I was lazy or lost or confused about direction. I knew exactly where I was going from the time I was 19 years old. I had a plan. I had frameworks and systems and a morning routine that would make most people exhausted just reading about it. I woke up before the sun. I read while other people slept. I sacrificed weekends, relationships, slow mornings, long meals, the kind of conversations where you lose track of time because you're too busy losing yourself in someone else. I sacrificed all of it, voluntarily, enthusiastically even, because I genuinely, completely, without a single reservation believed, that the cost of greatness was presence, that to build something that mattered, you had to hollow yourself out first, pour everything into the work, let the work become you, let the achievement speak where the person had gone silent. I built calendars that had no white space. I built habits that had no softness. I built a reputation on being the one who never cracked, never slowed down, never admitted that any of it was hard. I built a version of myself that was immensely productive and completely unreachable. And for a long time, for a long, long time, I called that strength. I wore it like armor. I wore it like a crown. Here's what I didn't understand then. Armor and crowns are heavy. Not at first. At first they feel like protection. At first they feel like power. But you wear them long enough, you forget what your own skin feels like. You forget what it's like to stand in a room and not be performing. You forget what it feels like to let someone look at you, really look at you, without immediately calculating what they're seeing, whether it measures up, whether you're enough, whether the image you've constructed is holding. I thought success would quiet the voice. You know the voice I mean. Don't look away from this. You know exactly the one that wakes up with you, the one that sits in the back of every accomplishment and whispers, "But is this enough? Are you enough? What if they find out you're not who they think you are? What if the whole thing comes apart and underneath it there's just nothing remarkable at all?" I thought if I built enough, achieved enough, produced enough, accumulated enough evidence of my own worth, that voice would finally go quiet. It didn't. It got louder in the silence, in every empty room I'd earned, in every quiet Sunday morning when the notifications stopped and there was nothing to optimize and nowhere to perform. In every moment the doing stopped and the being began, that voice rushed in like water through a crack. And it was merciless. Let me tell you something about the men and the women who build empires. We learned something early. We learned it young, and we learned it so thoroughly it became invisible to us, the way the air becomes invisible when you stop noticing you're breathing it. We learned that love was conditional. Maybe no one said it out loud. Maybe it was subtle. A father who lit up when you brought home the trophy, but was distracted when you just wanted to sit beside him. A mother whose worry felt like pride in disguise. A classroom where the kid who raised their hand got seen, and the kid who just sat quietly and felt things got overlooked. A culture that celebrated the result and had no language at all for the process, for the struggle, for the falling apart in private, and pulling yourself together for the presentation. We learned, perform, and you are loved. Produce, and you matter. Achieve, and you are safe. And so we performed. God, how we performed. We performed so long, so consistently, so thoroughly that we forgot it was a performance. We thought that was just who we were. We thought the machine was the man. We thought the output was the identity. We thought the calendar full of meetings and the inbox full of messages and the life full of forward motion was the same thing as a life full of meaning. It isn't. They are not the same thing. And one day, sometimes gradually, sometimes all at once, you find out the difference. Wait, before you scroll, I need you to stay here with me for a moment because I know what you're doing. I know because I did it for years. You're nodding along to the parts that feel safely abstract. You're relating to this the way you relate to a documentary about someone else's struggle, with sympathy, with intellectual recognition, with a comfortable emotional distance. You're saying to yourself, yes, that resonates, while simultaneously making sure it doesn't land too deep, doesn't get too close, doesn't require you to actually look at the life you've built and ask the question you've been avoiding. Don't do that. Please. Don't do that to yourself today. Look at me for a second. When is the last time you were fully, completely, unreservedly present? Not physically in the room, but actually there. All of you, undivided, unperforming, just genuinely in the moment with no part of your mind already moving ahead to the next thing. When is the last time you sat with someone who loves you and let them love you without immediately feeling the need to be impressive or useful or together? When is the last time you asked for help without treating it like a weakness you'd have to compensate for later? When is the last time you were just a person, not a brand, not a role, not a function, just a human being, breathing, uncertain, present? Tell me something. Is the life you're building something you want to live in, or is it something you want to be seen living in? Because that is a question that will keep you up at night if you let it. And maybe you should let it. Maybe the sleeplessness is the invitation. She didn't find me at my best. I want to be clear about that. There's a version of this story where the man has his breakthrough, gets his life together, and then the woman arrives as a reward, a sign that he's finally fixed, finally worthy of something soft. That's not what happened. That's not real. That's a fantasy we tell ourselves so we don't have to do the work before the relationship, so we can delay the excavation until someone else makes it feel safe. She found me in the middle of it, in the rubble, in the quiet, strange period after the crack, when I was still going through the motions, still showing up, still producing, still wearing the face. But privately, internally, I was standing in the wreckage of every assumption I'd ever had about who I was and what mattered. She didn't fix it. I need you to hear that clearly. She didn't fix anything. She didn't come in with answers or a plan or a redemptive love story that made everything suddenly make sense. She just stayed. She sat in rooms with me when I went quiet and didn't try to fill the silence with solutions. She asked questions, not to get answers, but because she was genuinely curious about the person underneath the performance. She laughed at things I'd never let myself find funny because I was always too busy being serious, too busy being impressive, too busy managing the image. She looked at the mess of me, the contradictions, the walls, the reflexive deflection, and she didn't flinch. She didn't leave. She didn't try to fix. She just offered something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd almost forgotten it was possible. She offered presence, just pure, unhurried, unjudging presence. Here's what I learned. Presence is the most terrifying thing you can offer another person when you've spent your whole life hiding. Because presence means visibility, means being seen without the filter, without the curated version, without the armor you spent years engineering to make sure no one ever has access to the parts of you that feel weak or uncertain or afraid. When someone offers you genuine presence, they're essentially offering you the chance to be fully known. And if you were raised, like so many of us were raised, to believe that being fully known is dangerous, that the real you is somehow insufficient, that love and acceptance are things you earn rather than things you simply receive, then presence feels like an ambush. I kept waiting for the catch. I kept waiting for the moment she'd see enough to walk away. I kept waiting for the condition to reveal itself, the fine print, the expectation, the performance she actually needed me to deliver in order to keep earning her. Because that was my model of love. That was the only version I'd ever internalized. Love that required maintenance. Love that was an ongoing audition. Love that you could lose by being too much or not enough or too real or too broken. She didn't have a catch. And that, paradoxically, was the most disorienting thing of all. I didn't know what to do with love that didn't demand a performance. I genuinely did not know how to receive it. I kept offering her accomplishments like they were flowers. I kept showing up with evidence of my worth when she just wanted me to show up. I kept solving problems she hadn't asked me to solve because sitting quietly beside a problem, being with someone in their difficulty without fixing it, felt unbearably passive to a man who had defined his entire identity by his ability to produce outcomes. She sat with me one evening. I remember it specifically. The light was that specific amber of late October, the kind that makes everything look like the last page of something. And she said, "You know you can just be here, right? You don't have to earn this." I didn't say anything, but something inside me shifted, something deep, something structural, something that had been holding at an angle for 20 years finally moved. I built a life that looked like a monument and functioned like a prison. I want you to sit with that sentence because I think you might recognize it. I think some part of you might be living inside a version of that sentence right now. The monument is real. I'm not dismissing what you've built, not minimizing the effort, not pretending the accomplishments don't matter. They do. You worked for them. You bled for them. There's genuine honor in the work. But a monument is not a home. You can't live inside a monument. You can't rest there. You can't be vulnerable there. You can't be uncertain there, or messy there, or human there. Monuments are for viewing from a distance, not for inhabiting. I'd built a monument and I was trying to live inside it, and the monument had no room for a person, only for a performance. Here's what I learned about collapse. When I finally stopped being able to hold the performance, not dramatically, not in any way visible from the outside, but internally, structurally, in the foundational architecture of how I understood myself. I thought it was destruction. I thought the emptiness I felt in that glass tower, looking down at a city that felt like a screensaver, was the end of something. It wasn't. It was mercy. The collapse was mercy. The emptiness was an invitation, not a punishment, not evidence that I'd failed, or that the life I'd built was worthless, or that I was somehow broken beyond repair. It was an invitation. It was the only invitation I might have been capable of receiving. Because a man like me, maybe a person like you, doesn't stop voluntarily, doesn't rest voluntarily, doesn't turn inward voluntarily. We are propelled by momentum, and we stay in motion until something forces us to stop. And what forces us to stop, when it finally comes, feels terrifying. It feels like loss. It takes time, sometimes a lot of time, to recognize it as grace. Don't deny it. I know you've felt this. I know underneath the productivity and the forward motion and the full calendar and the life that looks from a certain angle like it's working, I know there's something in you that's tired, not the tired that sleep fixes, the deeper kind, the kind that accumulates over years of performing, over years of keeping it together, over years of being the one who has the answers and manages the room and holds everything up and never allows anyone to see the cost of all that holding. I know the specific exhaustion of being invincible. I know what it costs to never ask for help. I know the loneliness inside success, the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who know your accomplishments and none of whom know your fears. And I know because I lived there for years, how seductive it is to keep going rather than stop and feel it. Because stopping means feeling it, and feeling it means admitting something. And admitting something means becoming vulnerable. And vulnerability for people like us feels like the one thing we cannot afford. Because we learned, somewhere early foundationally, that vulnerability is the door through which loss enters. That if you let someone see the uncertainty, the fear, the longing, the need, you give them a weapon. That it's safer to be a fortress than a home. But here's the thing about fortresses. Nobody lives there. You maintain them. You defend them. You are perpetually at war inside them. They are not places of rest. They are not places of warmth. They are not places where love can breathe. She asked me once what I was afraid of, not in a clinical way, not as a challenge, just quietly, in that way she had of asking things that created space rather than pressure. And I gave her the prepared answer, the acceptable answer, the answer that had just enough vulnerability to seem honest without actually risking anything. I said I was afraid of failure, of not building something that lasted, of irrelevance. She waited. She let the prepared answer land and settle and didn't move toward it, didn't validate it or push back on it. She just waited. And in that waiting, in that generous, patient, completely undefended waiting, I heard how hollow my answer sounded. I heard it the way you sometimes hear your own voice on a recording and realize with a start that it sounds nothing like who you think you are. And then, in a voice I barely recognized as mine, quieter, less constructed, more afraid, I said, I'm afraid of being known, really known. I'm afraid that if someone sees all of it, all the doubt, all the uncertainty, all the times I almost stopped, all the ways I don't have it together as much as I appear to, they'll leave. Or worse, they'll stay, but they'll know. They'll know I've been performing. They'll know the monument is not the man. They'll know the distance between who I appear to be and who I actually am, and that distance will make me embarrassing, small, not worth staying for. She didn't say anything for a long time after that. And then she said, very simply, very quietly, that's the most real thing you've ever said to me. I built a new foundation slowly, imperfectly, with no fanfare, no announcement, no moment of cinematic transformation where the music swells and the light changes and I emerge from the wreckage a different man. That's not how it works. You know that's not how it works. Transformation doesn't arrive on a single morning like a delivery. It is a daily, unglamorous, sometimes boring, sometimes excruciating process of choosing differently. Choosing presence over performance, choosing honesty over image, choosing to stay in the discomfort of being seen rather than retreating behind the comfort of being impressive. I learned to ask for help. That sounds small. It is not small. For a man whose entire identity was structured around not needing anything, around being the one with the answers, around never letting anyone see behind the curtain. Asking for help was the bravest thing I ever did. Not the achievements, not the risks I took in business or in life. Saying to another human being, I don't know how to do this part, I need you. That was the act of courage that changed everything. I learned to sit without doing, without optimizing, without producing. I learned to sit in a room with the people I loved and just be in the room with them. Not thinking about what was next, not half present while my mind ran ahead to the next thing on the list, not treating the moment as a brief pause between more important moments, just there, just breathing, just a person in a room with other people alive. I thought presence was passive. I thought it was what you did when you ran out of things to achieve. I was wrong. Presence is the most active, most demanding, most rewarding practice I have ever attempted. It requires more of me than any project I've ever built, because it requires me to bring myself, the actual self, not the performing self, into contact with the actual moment. And you cannot phone that in. You cannot systematize it. You cannot optimize it. You can only choose it, moment by moment, again and again. Here's what I learned about identity, about who you actually are underneath the structure of what you've accomplished. Strip away the achievements. And I know that sounds threatening. I know it sounds like I'm asking you to imagine losing the thing that makes you feel safe and significant. But strip them away for just a moment. Imagine a version of you that has built nothing yet, or has built something and had it taken, or has arrived at the terrifying open plain of starting over. Who is that person? What do they love? What frightens them honestly, not strategically? What do they long for in the quiet moments when the performance is over and the audience is gone and it's just them, just the actual person, alone with the question of what any of this is for? That person, that quiet, uncertain, longing, frightened, hopeful, real person, is not your weakness. They are not the part of you to overcome or outperform or leave behind. They are the foundation. They are the only part of you that is actually durable. Everything else is built on top of them, and if they are hollow or neglected or buried so deep under layers of performance that they can no longer breathe, the whole structure above them is at risk, not eventually. Imminently, I built an empire on an altar. I made achievement my God, and I gave it everything, my time, my presence, my relationships, my health, my interior life. I laid it all on the altar of productivity, and I thought I was being disciplined, visionary, exceptional. I was being hollow. I was building a magnificent structure on a foundation of unexamined fear. And when the crack came, when I sat in that glass room and felt nothing, it was the foundation asking to be acknowledged. It was the person underneath, the performance finally, exhaustedly asking to be seen. She and I built something together. Not an empire, not a monument, a home, a quiet, unimpressive, astonishingly difficult, daily chosen home. It doesn't look like much from the outside. It doesn't have the clean lines and compelling narrative of the monument. It is inconsistent and messy, and sometimes we get it wrong and have to repair it. There are arguments that are really about older wounds. There are silences that require courage to break. There are days when the old instinct comes back, the performance instinct, the armor instinct, the reflex to be impressive rather than honest. And I have to choose consciously, deliberately to put it down. Every brick of this home was laid by choice. Not by talent, not by momentum, not by drive or ambition, or the relentless forward motion that built the monument. By choice, by the small, daily, unglamorous decision to be present, to be honest, to ask for help, to admit uncertainty, to sit beside someone in their difficulty without trying to solve it, to allow myself to be held in mine, to keep choosing the real over the performed even on the days, and there are days, when the real is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or frightening. This is the work. This is the actual work, not the productivity, not the optimization, not the relentless accumulation of evidence that you are worthy. The actual work is presence. The actual achievement is becoming someone who can be known and choosing to let that be enough. I want to talk to you directly for a moment. You, specifically. The one watching this at whatever hour you're watching it, in whatever state you're in when this found you. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you're successful and empty simultaneously, which is a specific kind of disorientation nobody prepares you for. Maybe you're in the middle of something. A relationship strained by your absence. A friendship that's become a formality. A version of yourself you've been performing so long you can barely remember the original. Maybe you're sitting in something you built and feeling the specific loneliness of having built it alone, of having optimized yourself out of the moments that mattered, of having chased something so hard you didn't notice what you were running past. Maybe you're standing at the beginning of a collapse that terrifies you. Maybe you're already in the wreckage. Maybe the crack appeared yesterday or last year or 10 years ago, and you've been plastering over it ever since, maintaining the surface, keeping up the appearance, unwilling to stop long enough to acknowledge how deep it goes. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to sell you a system or a framework or a 5-step process for rebuilding your foundation. This is not that kind of conversation. This is a man who collapsed and rebuilt, telling you that the collapse was not the end, that the emptiness was not evidence of failure, that the crack in the monument was the mercy, not the punishment, that the thing you're afraid to feel is also the thing that will finally, at last, after all these years of armor and performance and deferred presence, bring you home. Tell me something. What would it mean to stop performing? Not forever, not in every context, not recklessly, carelessly, at the cost of everything you've built, but in the relationships that matter most, in the quiet moments, in the private interior of who you actually are when nobody is watching and nothing needs to be optimized. What would it mean to let yourself be known? To stop curating the image for just long enough to let someone see the person? To stop treating your vulnerability as a liability and start treating it as the only real currency of connection? What are you waiting to become before you allow yourself to actually live the life you're building? What threshold of achievement must you cross before you decide you're enough to be loved without performance? What evidence do you need? How much more will you build on the altar before you realize you've been sacrificing presents for monuments, and the monuments are empty? Here's what I know. The voice that tells you that you're not enough, that voice is not the truth. It is a survival response. It is the internalized verdict of environments that condition love to performance, that made acceptance contingent on output, that taught you early that the surest way to be safe was to be exceptional. It kept you safe once, it propelled you forward. I will not dishonor the survival mechanism that got you here, but it is no longer serving you. It is keeping you in motion when what you need is to stop. It is keeping you performing when what you need is to be present. It is keeping you in the fortress when what you need, what you have always needed, what every human being needs without exception, is a home. The rebuilding begins with a single brick, not a proclamation, not a transformation, a brick. One conversation where you say what you actually mean instead of what sounds right. One moment where you stay in the discomfort of being seen instead of retreating behind the safety of being impressive. One request for help that you don't immediately compensate for with a display of capability. One evening where you put down the phone and look at the person across from you and decide that this moment, this person, this ordinary Tuesday is the life you were building toward, and you choose to be in it. She is not a metaphor. I want to be clear about that. She is a person, specific, complicated, full of her own history and wounds and contradictions. She is not perfect, and neither am I, and this is not a love story in the Hollywood sense. It is not effortless or frictionless or cinematically convenient. It is real. And real is harder than perfect. Real requires more of you than an ideal does. Real asks you to show up on the ordinary days, the hard days, the days when the version of you showing up is not your best version. Not the impressive version, not the together version, not the version you'd choose if you had the luxury of curating yourself. Real asks you to show up as what you are. And I'm here to tell you that being loved as what you are, fully, honestly, without performance, is the achievement that all the other achievements were pointing toward, imperfectly, incompletely, without knowing that was what they were doing. Every monument was an attempt to earn what can only be received. Every accomplishment was a love letter written to an address that doesn't exist. The presence you were trying to prove through performance was always available through presence itself. The ending of my old story was not the end. I want you to hold that. Whatever is cracking in your life right now, whatever is emptying, whatever is exposing the distance between the monument and the man, between the empire and the home, between the performance and the person, it is not the end of your story. It is the invitation. It is the most expensive, most necessary, most loving invitation you will ever receive. The foundation is not what you built, the foundation is who you are. And who you are is not the performance, not the accomplishments, not the systems and optimizations and metrics of a life conducted at maximum efficiency. Who you are is the one who showed up afraid every single day and kept going. Who you are is the one who survived the environments that taught you love was conditional and came out the other side still capable of love, still reaching for it, still here, still watching this at this hour, which means still hoping. And hope, the particular stubborn, irrational hope of a person who hasn't yet given up on the possibility of something real, is the most foundational thing I know. Don't scroll away from this. Whatever is unfinished in you, leave it unfinished for a moment and just be here. Whatever you haven't figured out, let yourself not have it figured out just for tonight. Whatever you've been holding together at personal cost, set it down, even briefly, even imperfectly, and let yourself feel the relief of not holding it for just one moment. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too broken, or too far gone, or too deep into the monument to find your way back to the foundation. The crack is still there. The invitation is still open. The person underneath the performance is still waiting, patiently, stubbornly, with the kind of hope that refuses to extinguish even after years of being told to be practical, to be productive, to keep moving, to stop feeling, to perform and perform and perform. That person is the one worth building for. Not the audience, not the metrics, not the reputation, not the monument, the person. Quiet, real, frightened, hopeful, and absolutely worth knowing. If this found you today, if this came across your screen at this particular hour in this particular moment of your particular life, maybe it was never an accident. Maybe some part of you sent it to yourself. Maybe the part of you that is tired of performing, tired of the fortress, tired of the distance between the life you're building and the life you're actually living, maybe that part orchestrated this moment. Maybe the crack was already open and this just fell through it. And maybe that is enough. Maybe this is the brick. Maybe this is where the real foundation begins. I built a monument and I collapsed inside it. I met someone who stayed. I chose, slowly, daily, imperfectly, to be present. I am not finished. I will not pretend to be finished. The work of becoming real, of staying present, of choosing the home over the monument over and over, in the ordinary moments that constitute a life, that work does not end, but it gets lighter, not easier, lighter. The difference matters. Easier suggests the resistance disappears. Lighter means you carry it differently. You carry it as a person who has chosen it rather than a person it has chosen. You carry it with purpose rather than fear. That shift, that quiet, unglamorous, life-altering shift is available to you, not someday, now, in the next conversation, in the next quiet moment, in the next time someone offers you presence and your instinct is to perform rather than receive. Choose the brick over the monument, choose the home over the empire, choose the person over the performance, choose presence one moment, then another, and watch what gets built.